Hey guys, this is Megan here for Dynamic Modeling of Cities 2020, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create bar charts using Adobe After Effects. This is a really cool tool that you can use for any of your presentations, be it work or university. So let's jump straight in. In Adobe After Effects, there are three main panels: project, composition, and timeline, and then you've got tools on the right hand side. To create a new project, you've got composition or new composition from footage, or you can double click in the project panel to search your files, but what I'm going to do is drag and drop directly from my file finder into the project panel. From there, double click on the video to make it appear in your composition panel. Pressing spacebar will allow you to play or pause the video, and then once you're happy with that video, you can drag it from the project panel into your timeline. Then from there, I'm not quite happy with this video. It's some raw footage from a street in Melbourne. So what I'm going to do is go into the effects panel on the right hand side and add a saturation modifier by typing in hue and saturation and then dragging that modifier over the timeline. Then from there, you can go into master saturation and then drag that to -100. And then I'll just add a contrast luminance over the top of that to get the saturation just as I want it. So I'm going to start creating each of the individual elements of my bar chart using the pen tool found in the tools panel. If you can't find that, it's available in Windows under the top ribbon. So G enables the pen tool. Holding down shift will give you a nice straight line. Then up on the top ribbon, I'm going to adjust the stroke to about 7. If you can't find the stroke, just make sure your layer is selected. And then the next thing that you want to do is rename that layer. So I'm going to name it here to sidebar. Now that we've got that sidebar in place, I'm going to press Ctrl T, which will allow me to create some text to accompany our graphics. So here I'm going to add the percentages up the side and then use the parameters panel on the right hand side to make any adjustments, such as the type, the size of the type, and where it's located on the frame. So here I've got 0%, and then typing in P will allow you to reposition that closer to the line that we have just created. Then using the duplicate shortcut, once again we're going to duplicate that text to create the other values alongside of our bar chart. With each new text frame here, I'm just typing in P to position it where I want alongside my bar chart here. As I mentioned, you can also go and adjust the parameters on the right hand side. Once you've done that, it's also good to go back to the layer stack and rename that layer so that you know what it is. Once you've created a layer, it's usually best practice to drag it to the top of the layer stack as well, but it depends where you want it in the order of your layers. Now I'm just going to drag this 50% up a little higher so that it fits in nicely. And then just renaming this top number here to 100%. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here is to create the individual bars of my bar chart using the Ctrl D shortcut or Command D on a Mac. And then what we want to do is rename that layer. I've renamed it BB1 for bar background 1, and then as I mentioned, best practice is to drag that layer up into the top of the layer stack. Then the next thing I'm going to do is adjust the stroke. I'm adjusting it to a stroke of 50, which is nice and visible. And then using T, another shortcut that will allow me to adjust the opacity. So I've got an opacity here of around 30, which is still nice and visible on that background I've got. Then using P, once again, dragging it out to the desired location. From there, I'm just going to type in T again and adjust my opacity there on bar background 1 to 40. It's not quite what I want it to be yet. Then I'm going to create my first bar that will sit in front of that bar background by typing in Ctrl D or Command D on a Mac. Once I've done that, I'll rename that layer to bar 1. From there, what I'm going to do is type in T and adjust my opacity to 100. Step is going to be the first element of that animation by going into the bar 1 drop down, contents, going to add it on the right hand side, and then trim paths down the bottom of the list there. From there, you can adjust the start and end values of your animation under trim paths. As an example, I'm going to type in 35% on the start value. As you can see though, it's at the wrong end of my bar chart there. So what I'm going to do to fix that is go into shape, drop down and then under the path I'm going to switch that around, and now it's going in the right direction. My next step is going to be to automate that animation that we've just created by going into layer in the top panel and then null object. Under that, we're then going to rename this layer. I'm going to rename it here to control, as it will control all of our layers. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is go into effect again on the top ribbon and then go expression controls and then slider control. That will appear then under the control layer, and then create a link here with this linking icon up into the slider on the control panel there. And then that will create the link. My best tip for doing this is to not adjust the start and end times within the layer panel, but to wait to adjust those in the slider control panel up the top. I'll then duplicate each of those slider controls. So to create our animated bar chart, we're just going to repeat that process. Then as you can see, I've also added some text using the Ctrl T shortcut that I showed you earlier. Next, I'm going to activate each of the keyframes in the control panel up the top and get them to appear in the timeline by pressing the shortcut U. Then I'm going to select all of the keyframes here along the slider and drag those out to about 3 seconds. The next step is quite important. This is to go in and then adjust all the keyframe times back down to 0, and that will create our automated animation effect. But there's just one step missing here, and that's just to create some staggering between my keyframes. And what that's going to achieve is to create a nice staggered entrance for the animation of the bar chart. So what I'm doing here is selecting each of the rows and then holding down F9, which will allow me to drag that row out along the timeline, and then you'll be able to see the results. So moving the slider here, we can see the staggering of the bar chart. So I'm just going to hold down spacebar here to show you the final result. To export that, just go into File, Export, and you can add it to your render queue or export it with Adobe Media Encoder.